Hey everybody, it's week 20 here at the Victory Garden, and we're actually going to try and get this video out to you a little bit early because it looks like we are going to have some kind of early surprise cold nights this week, and they're actually even calling for potential scattered frost on Wednesday night this week. So that's early, and so we're going to just walk you around the garden and give you some tips for what to do before frost comes.
So first we're going to start talking about the basil. Basil is, I would say, one of the more susceptible herbs to a frost or to really low temperatures. So there's some plants that really, when nights start to drop down or even days start to drop down to below 50, they're going to pretty much just stop growing. They're just going to really go into this dormant mode and get kind of prepared for the eventual die-off. So our basil is looking really, really nice, and we don't want to lose this. So this would be the time where maybe you'd want to go ahead, since it's going to be lower than 40 degrees on Wednesday night, we're just maybe going to go ahead and take these whole plants and just cut everything we can and bring them in. And this is time to maybe make some pesto, or time to try out some oven drying. And if you don't really have the time to deal with this much plant matter, or you want to take care of it this weekend, you can always just snip off some of the bigger branches, or even if you're really ambitious, take the whole plant and put it in some water. Just put it in a big pot with water, and putting it in water, just like with your flower bouquets, are going to keep it lasting longer and give you more time to figure out what to do with it. And here in the basil patch, we've got a little ambitious squash vine. So it's actually still making flowers. And this is the time where none of the flowers on your zucchinis, your winter squash, nothing like that, they're not gonna have time to make fruits. So you could actually eat them. And if you're a little bit worried earlier in the season about eating your flowers and you don't want to lose any of your fruits, this is the perfect time to experiment with something maybe you've never had before. So you can go ahead and harvest and eat any of your squash blossoms.
Tomatoes are another cold sensitive crop, so they aren't as sensitive as basil, but they will be killed if there's a frost. So because the nighttime temperatures are getting down into the 30s, a good approach would be to pick any of your tomatoes that are for sure the ripe ones, but even some that are just starting to turn. If they've got a little bit of red on them, like this one does, you can pick those, and those will finish ripening in the house. And then if you're not ready to be done with tomato season, you could just throw something over these plants the evening that we're going to get the frost, and just something like a sheet, a tarp. Cucumbers are like tomatoes in that they are not going to like the cold weather. If you are like me, you've probably had enough cucumbers this summer, so I'm just going to go ahead and pick all of the cucumbers that are on this plant and just kind of let it go. If you're not ready to say goodbye to your cucumber plant yet, you could do the same thing that you're going to do with your tomatoes. You could certainly, throw a sheet or a blanket or something over it. Particularly because this frost is going to be so early in the season, we could very well have some really nice weather, like several weeks of really good weather yet. And so any of the plants that you can save through this frost, you'll probably still get some fruit out of it if you're able to protect it. So it could very well be worth it.
So here we are in our lovely summer squash zucchini patch, which again, like the cucumbers, some of us may be zucchinied out for the season. So these plants, we kind of stopped picking them a couple weeks ago. They were slowing down a little bit, but we wanted to see if we could grow the prize-winning zucchini. So it's kind of fun when you're done with zucchinis to find what you've missed out in the patch. And these are great if you've got animals. Sometimes even dogs like to chew on zucchinis. If you want to break one open, that's fun. Otherwise, we're just going to let these plants do what they're going to do. And it is kind of this mid-30s, so we might not see any frost, and these plants might continue to grow. Otherwise, if it does frost a little bit, the summer squash is pretty sensitive, and so is the winter squash. And we've got this nice winter squash patch back here. We've got some acorn squash, and the acorn squash is actually being really well protected by the leaves. So if there is a light frost, those leaves are gonna take, they're gonna take all that frost, and the fruits underneath shouldn't be affected at all. So we're just gonna go ahead and leave our acorn squash in their nice little protective layer of leaves. Otherwise, if they were laying out in the open and they're still curing, that's another thing that, like the tomatoes or cucumbers, you could go and take a sheet or something, a light covering, and just put it over the plants to make sure that they are okay overnight when it frosts.
Beans are another plant that are very frost sensitive, so they will not make it through a frost. If you're still harvesting your beans, you could certainly, try the throw a sheet over them trick. Again, I might go out and try and pick as many beans as I could before the frost came. We are seed saving our beans, and if you did the same thing that we did, where you kind of left some of your beans on the plants here to dry. So if you have plants that are really dry, like this one, you could certainly just pull this one up at this point and bring it in. We also have some that still have some green leaves on them. So I think the thing to do here would be to protect them with a sheet, and that way they can finish ripening up their bean seeds while they're still on the plant. Another plant I want to mention here, we've got the broccoli and the cauliflower. Broccoli and cauliflower are actually in a family of plants that are not very cold sensitive. So if you still have broccoli and cauliflower, those you don't have to worry about. They'll be fine through a frost.
All right, so here we are with a different type of squash. So these are our butternut squash, and as you can see, they are kind of out here in the open, and we've been letting them cure for I think a couple weeks now. So their stems are starting to get really hard. The outer flesh is not really easy to pierce with a fingernail, so these ones are probably just about ready to harvest. And because we are a little bit worried about this frost, any of them that are out here and unprotected, if they're ready to go, if they're nice and hard and cured, then we are going to want to harvest them. And any of them that they're not quite ready, they're still a little bit soft and have really juicy stems, we're probably going to want to cover them.
When you're harvesting your winter squash, you want to make sure that you leave the stem on the fruit and don't break it right at the fruit. So it's good to use something like a pruner, and then actually use the pruner to cut the fruit, and that way you won't end up with an open sore here where the stem meets the fruit.
So here we are with our kale, our parsley, and our cabbages, and these are all in families of crops that are really cold tolerant. So these plants you don't need to worry about at all. And in fact, kale is one of them that actually tastes sweeter and gets a better flavor after a couple of frosts.
I just wanted to mention too that we had already dug up our beets and our carrots, but if you did plant those and you still have them in the ground, beets and carrots will both be totally fine in a frost. They're a frost hardy plant, so no need to worry about them.
Yeah, so we kind of saw a lot of different Victory Garden plants in here, and if we just kind of think back to, I don't know, like 16 weeks ago, back when we were just talking about our trays and just getting our trays for the first time, we talked a little bit about the differences in plant families, and so you might notice there were some similarities. So our nightshade family would be tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, if you found those and grew those, and they're not very cold hardy. They really like that hot weather. So those ones we're recommending, you take some protection for in these cold nights, or you harvest them. There's also the squash family, the cucurbit family, and they're not very frost hardy. They again like it just really hot and moist, and they're not going to do so well in this cold temperature. And then as we saw, our broccoli, cauliflower, kale, cabbage is all in the brassica family, or the cole crop family, and those are plants that actually thrive in the cold weather and in the cool weather. So they are going to do really well this week, and they're something that kind of you can keep eating really as we get into the fall. Kale is a plant that is known for being able
flowers go, some herbs and flowers are really frost sensitive, like the basil, and some are very, very hardy, like the parsley, and that's going to be very plant dependent. So, you know, if there's a particular herb that you have that you really don't want to lose, you might want to just look it up. Because, as I said, some of them will die in a frost and some of them won't be harmed at all.
One final note is if you've got potted plants, that can be something that if you're worried about temperature dips, your potted plants are really easy to just take into the garage or take into even just closer to your house, you know, even just putting them on a patio or on a porch or something, just getting them, you know, next to some protective structure. That should help them stay alive through any of this cold weather. And same with if you've got raised bed gardens, that can be an easy one where if you're not sure if it's going to frost or not, you know, maybe you just take an old bed sheet out, just cover the bed up, and remember if you're covering anything that you will want to take the sheet off during the day if it gets sunny out, because you don't want your plants to actually cook under that protection. But just, you know, throwing something on overnight can really help to make a difference if it's just, you know, really close to that frost point. So just a couple other considerations if you've got some different styles of gardens. And
yeah, and I wanted to just mention something about frost too. It's kind of interesting. Frost tends to settle in low places, so you might even find in your garden that some areas will be frosted and others won't, because frost tends to settle where it's low. And also, if we end up having the low temperatures and it's a really clear, still night, you're much more likely to get a frost than if it's a windy night or if it's an overcast night or if you're getting some rain. So you just have to plan to get the frost, and you never know if you're going to get it, you know, for sure or not. But those are just some factors that can affect it.
So that was just a quick look around the garden, just kind of getting everybody thinking about, you know, if there's going to be frost, what you want to do, steps to take, or maybe you're just ready for it to all be done. You've got enough processed and canned and frozen for the winter, and you're just ready for cool nights. Otherwise, we hope that you are getting ready for this frost, and thank you for joining us. And as usual, if you've got any questions, leave them in the comments below. We will try to check on it and get you any answers as soon as we can. And we will see you next week on the other side of this cold weather.
Bye.
Thanks.